I never meant to end up in her kitchen that night. It started earlier in the day, when I wandered into the corner coffee shop like I always did, mostly because it gave me somewhere to sit that wasn't my apartment. I didn't have much of a routine, but the barista had started to remember my order: black coffee, no sugar, and there was a comfort in that. Still, I noticed how often I left it to go cold. I caught myself staring out the window more than at my phone. I'd unlock it, scroll halfway through a message thread I never answered, then set it face down. Some people carry loneliness like a weight. For me, it showed up in the half-finished things: mugs left on the counter, drafts unsent, the pause before saying something I'd never say. That's when she walked in. I'd seen her before, just not here. Always at my best friend's house. She was his mom, the one who'd wave from the doorway when I picked him up for late-night drives or drop-offs after games. Seeing her framed against the hum of the cafe lights felt different. She wore her hair tied back, loose strands falling at her cheek. Nothing about it should have caught my attention, but my eyes flicked over before I even realized. She noticed me too. A pause, then the briefest smile. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, sliding into the line. "Didn't expect to be seen," I muttered before I could stop myself. Too quiet, almost lost under the hiss of the espresso machine. She tilted her head, amused. "Black coffee, right?" It startled me that she remembered. My friend never paid attention to things like that, but she always had. The way she asked made it feel like a secret. We didn't sit together, but we weren't far apart either. A few tables away, I could feel her presence in the way people notice a clock ticking: subtle, steady, unavoidable once you know it's there. Every so often, our eyes would meet and bounce away like we'd both looked too long. When she stood to leave, she passed by my table. I folded the napkin I'd been shredding between my fingers and tried not to glance at her hands as she set her cup down in the bin. "Don't stay here all night," she said, half turning back. A light comment, nothing loaded. Still, I felt my throat catch on the words I didn't answer with. Later, I found myself at their house. My friend had gone upstairs to grab something, and I lingered by the kitchen, still tasting the sharp bitterness of coffee on my tongue. The lights inside felt warmer than they should have. That's when she looked up from the counter. "I've been waiting for you," she said. Her voice wasn't playful. It wasn't dramatic either. It was quieter than that, like she had finally decided not to keep something to herself anymore. My pulse jumped, but the silence after seemed to stretch longer than it should have, filled with all the things either of us were ready to say. I shifted my weight, fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. She stood there, steady, her hands resting on the counter like she needed to ground herself. And that's where it hung, between us, in the quiet hum of the kitchen. Her words stayed in the air longer than they should have. "I've been waiting for you." It echoed, not as an invitation, but like a truth that had slipped out too easily. I forced a breath. "For me?" My voice cracked on the last word. She didn't look away. "I knew you'd follow him here. You always do. I thought, maybe you'd stop in the kitchen this time." It sounded ordinary, but the weight beneath it pressed against me. I set my bag on the floor, slower than necessary, just to have something to do with my hands. She moved toward the kettle, filling it with water. "Tea?" I nodded, though I rarely drank it. My throat was too dry for coffee anyway. The hiss of water running filled the silence, and I caught myself watching her hands, the way her knuckles tensed slightly as she turned the tap, the quiet steadiness in how she placed the kettle on the stove. "You and him," she said after a moment. "You remind me of when I was younger. The way you don't seem to know where you're heading, but you go anyway." Her tone was casual, but something flickered in her eyes when she said younger. I wondered if she meant her son's age, or mine. I smiled faintly. "Guess we're still figuring it out." Her lips curved, but not in humor. "Some things don't get figured out. They just get left behind." The kettle began its slow rumble, and I felt the words catch in my chest. There was a part of me that wanted to ask what she meant. Divorce? Loneliness? Something else she wasn't saying? But I bit it back. My questions always sounded too heavy when I asked them. Instead, I noticed a framed photo on the counter, her with my friend, taken years ago. His arm around her shoulder, both smiling like the world hadn't touched them yet. It reminded me suddenly of the line I hadn't crossed until now. She wasn't just someone I noticed at a coffee shop. She was his mom. She set the cups down, steam rising between us. I wrapped my hands around mine, letting the heat sting. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly. I shrugged, eyes fixed on the swirling surface of the tea. "I don't really know what I'm supposed to say." Her hand brushed the edge of my cup as she pushed the sugar bowl closer, an unnecessary gesture. She knew I wouldn't take any. Still, the touch was enough to jolt something in me. "Sometimes saying nothing is better," she murmured. I looked up then, and her gaze lingered just a moment longer than it should have. Not motherly, not casual. Just steady. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't name. I thought of my friend upstairs, unaware. I thought of the way I'd sat in the cafe earlier, phone buzzing with words I never sent. Now I didn't need a scream to feel the weight of the unsaid. Her hand was still resting near mine on the table, fingers close enough that one careless movement would bridge the space. And before I realized it, I leaned in just slightly, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence, though either of us crossed the line. Not yet. Her hand was still near mine, the steam from our cups rising between us like a thin curtain. I shifted, just enough for my fingers to almost brush hers. Too close. Not close enough. The floor creaked upstairs. My friend moving around. A reminder. A warning. She pulled back first, sliding her cup toward her, eyes fixed on the swirl inside. The space she left behind felt louder than her silence. "You shouldn't linger here," she said finally, voice low. "Why not?" The question left me before I thought it through. Her lips parted like she had an answer, but nothing came. She gave a small shake of her head instead, strands of hair slipping loose at her temple. I wanted to reach up and tuck them back, absurd as that thought was. The kettle clicked off behind us, though we hadn't touched it in minutes. Neither of us moved. Then footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, careless. My friend's voice calling down. "You good?" I jerked upright. "Yeah," I said too quickly, the word sharp in the air. She looked at me then, steady but unreadable, her hand curling around the cup like she was bracing herself. My friend appeared in the doorway for half a second, phone in hand, scrolling without looking up. "Be right back," he mumbled, already turning away. Gone. The house sank back into quiet, heavier than before. She exhaled softly. "You see? That's why." I swallowed, throat tight. "He didn't notice." Her eyes lifted to mine, sharp for the first time. "That doesn't make it less dangerous." The words struck deeper than I expected. Because she wasn't wrong. And yet, why was she still here, sitting this close, if she meant them? The clock on the wall ticked too loud, each second a reminder of the line neither of us crossed. My pulse kept time with it, uneven, restless. She pushed her chair back, just a fraction. The scrape against the floor sent a shiver through me, like the sound of something ending. "Maybe I should," I started, though I had no idea how to finish. Her gaze caught mine, stopping me mid-breath. She didn't lean in. Didn't move away there. Just held me there, in that suspended space. I felt it then, the shift in the air. The way her shoulder tilted toward me without meaning to. The way my hand twitched against the table, useless in its hesitation. "Don't," she whispered. Not firm. Not certain. More like she was warning herself than me. But I was already leaning forward, a fraction, barely enough to count. My breath caught. Her eyes dropped, to my mouth, just for a second, before lifting back. And that was when the door slammed shut upstairs. A sharp thud, the sound of my friend moving again. We froze. Pulled back at the same time, like the moment had never existed. But it had. And the air between us still carried it. It was a few days later, after another long evening that stretched without meaning to. My friend had left for a late shift, and somehow I found myself walking home slower than usual, passing her porch lights still glowing in the dusk. She was outside, sitting on the low bench near the front steps, a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. A mug balanced in her hands, steam curling faintly in the cool air. "You walk past like a stranger," she said without looking up. I stopped, unsure if she was serious. "Didn't want to bother you." Her eyes flicked toward me then, sharp in the fading light. "You already do?" The words stung, though her voice didn't mean them that way. More like a confession than an accusation. I sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving space, though the wood creaked beneath us like it knew. Silence stretched. The street was empty except for the hum of a far-off car. She set her mug down carefully. "You know what I think about sometimes? How fast it all goes. One moment you're 20 and the world is wide open. Next moment you're here, middle-aged, counting how many years are left instead of how many you've got." Her laugh was dry, too soft to really count as laughter. I wanted to say something to close the distance, but all I managed was, "Does it feel that different?" Her head tilted toward me. "From you?" "Yes. From myself, not as much as I'd like." The honesty in her voice startled me. My chest tightened, like I'd been given a glimpse I wasn't supposed to see. She looked away, to the trees shifting in the wind. "Sometimes I forget you're his friend. Then I remember, and it feels wrong. Like I'm stealing something that isn't mine." I swallowed, searching for words. "I don't think I belong to him." Her lips pressed together, as if she'd heard more in that than I meant to give away. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Then why are we sitting here?" The words slipped out, rougher than intended. "Why do you wait for me in kitchens, or remember how I take my coffee? Why let me stay if it's wrong?" She closed her eyes briefly, her hands knotting together in her lap. For a moment I thought she would stand, leave me with the question dangling. But she didn't. Instead, she said, almost too softly, "Because it feels less lonely when you're here." The quiet after hit harder than if she'd confessed anything else. "Less lonely?" The phrase echoed inside me, shifting everything I thought I understood. I turned slightly toward her. Her face was calm, but her fingers twisted against each other, restless. The urge to reach out, to stop her hands, to steady them, rose before I could contain it. I did nothing. Just sat there, breath caught, heart pounding. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady and searching. And then the question lingered, unspoken but heavy in the space between us. Are you going to cross this line, or am I? The next week felt different. I passed the same porch light a few times, slower than usual, waiting for her shadow to appear in the window, for some excuse to pause, to linger. But the curtains stayed closed, the kitchen dark. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't in the quiet. She was coming out of the grocery store, a bag tucked under her arm, her pace brisk, her face unreadable. She saw me, hesitated just a beat too long, then gave a polite smile, the kind you'd give any neighbor. Nothing more. I almost called her name. Didn't. Later that night, my friend mentioned something in passing while tossing a ball into the air, not even looking at me. "Mom's been talking to Dad again. Crazy, right? After all these years." The words hit harder than he knew. I nodded like it was nothing, but my chest hollowed out. I hadn't even known his dad existed in her world anymore, but of course he did. People don't just vanish because you want them to. The next time I did see her, she didn't invite me in. She stood in the doorway, cardigan pulled tight, her body angled like she was keeping the frame between us on purpose. "Long day?" I asked. Her eyes softened, then clouded. "Every day feels long lately." I waited for more, but she didn't give it. And I couldn't tell if that was a wall going up or just fatigue. So I started staying away. Not on purpose, at least that's what I told myself. But I let texts from my friend go unanswered, skipped the coffee shop once or twice. I told myself I was busy, though the truth was simpler. I didn't know what she wanted anymore, and the not knowing gnawed at me. The silence stretched wider between us than any words could have. One night I typed a message, "Are you okay? Do you want me to come by?" My thumb hovered over send. I stared at the glowing screen until the letters blurred, then deleted it. Instead, I lay back, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, the tea, the bench, the words she'd said, "Because it feels less lonely when you're here." I wasn't sure if she meant that once, or if she still did. The next morning, I walked past her house, slowed by habit. The porch was empty, her windows shut. I almost turned up the steps, almost knocked on the door. My fist tightened, then loosened. I kept walking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late again when I saw her, light spilling from the kitchen window. I hadn't planned to stop, but my feet carried me up the path anyway. For days, maybe weeks, we'd been orbiting the silence, and I couldn't stand it any longer. She opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been listening for me. Her face was tired, softer than usual. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but the edge in her voice was gone. "Then tell me to leave," I replied. My words sounded steadier than I felt. She didn't. She stepped aside. Inside, the kitchen was warm, cluttered, an empty mug in the sink, a newspaper folded but unread on the counter. It felt lived in, ordinary. That was what made it dangerous. We sat at the table again, the same one where our hands had almost touched before. Neither of us reached this time. The silence filled up, pressing against us until I couldn't hold it back. "You've been avoiding me," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "I had to." "Because of him?" "Because of everything," she murmured. She rubbed at the edge of the table with her thumb, as if she could wear down the grain. "You don't understand what it would mean. To him. To me." "I don't care what it means," I said too quickly. Then softer. "I just don't want to wonder anymore." That made her look at me. Really look. There was something raw in her gaze, fear, yes, but also recognition. Like she saw the same thing in me that she'd been trying to bury in herself. "I'm not supposed to feel this," she whispered. "I know," I said. We sat in it. The clock ticked, steady and merciless. I wanted to reach across the table, but I held back. Maybe she was waiting for me to move. Maybe she was waiting for me not to. "I was married for 20 years, she said suddenly, voice breaking slightly. "And not once did I feel this scene. Not once." Her confession cracked the air open. I leaned forward, heart pounding. "Then don't pretend it isn't real." Her hand lifted halfway across the table before faltering. Mine did the same. We hovered there, the space between us charged, fragile. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice trembling in the quiet. "You don't have to know," I answered. "Just don't shut me out." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then her fingers brushed mine, barely, like testing the weight of it. Not a kiss. Not a declaration. Just skin on skin, warm and human. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, almost sad. "Okay," she breathed. And that was all. Time passed, though not in any dramatic way. Days turned into weeks, routines settled back into their patterns. I still stopped by the coffee shop most mornings, black coffee, no sugar. Only now, sometimes, there was a second cup on the table, hers. She didn't always come, but when she did, the barista started remembering her order too. Small details that nobody else noticed. We didn't rush anything. It wasn't fireworks or stolen moments in secret. It was simpler, quiet talks on her porch when the street was empty, walking side by side at dusk, the kettle hissing between us while the world outside turned. Sometimes she'd still pull back, retreat into herself. The weight of years doesn't disappear overnight. She'd fold her cardigan tighter, or look away when my hand brushed hers. But then, almost always, she'd circle back, an evening later, a half smile at the bench where we first sat. Like she was reminding herself it was allowed to feel less lonely. I never asked her to name it. She never demanded I define it. That was part of the peace we found, knowing it was real without needing to prove it. Her son, my friend, remained the unspoken boundary between us. But slowly, even that shifted. There were dinners where I stayed longer than I should have, evenings where his laughter carried upstairs while we lingered in the kitchen. He never noticed, or maybe he did and chose silence. Either way, the house felt less like a secret, more like a home. One morning, at exactly 8:47 a.m., I walked into the coffee shop and found her already there, reading the paper, a half-empty mug by her side. She looked up, caught my eye, and for the first time, she didn't glance away. "You're late," she teased. I sat across from her, sliding my cup next to hers. "Or you're early." She laughed softly, folding the corner of her newspaper, like she was finally letting the day begin. Later, as we walked home together, she reached for my hand, not cautious, not hesitant, just steady. I didn't need words to understand what it meant. It wasn't about declarations or promises. It was about being here, now, both of us choosing this, again and again, in the quiet ways. On her porch, she paused before unlocking the door, her fingers still wrapped in mine. The same bench sat a few feet away, weathered from seasons passing. I glanced at it, then at her, and she smiled like she knew exactly what I was thinking. "Tea tonight?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, a smile tugging at me. "Tea." And that was it. Nothing grand. Nothing cinematic. Just a moment that felt earned. A kind of love that didn't need to be spoken because it was lived.